So this is a picture from 2015. And I had a 2-year-old. My husband is holding our 2-year-old. I had a 1-year-old. And then I was actually pregnant with a set of twins. One of my primary concerns was actually how I could still remain professionally engaged and prioritize my family. My professional life is really important to me. It's where I feel like I give my gifts to the world. I think work is how we solve some of the world's biggest problems. And I really love doing good work. And I couldn't parent in line with my values and be gone for 50 to 60 hours a week, which was what my job at the time was requiring. And I knew I wasn't alone. I was watching friends who had kids, friends who had aging parents, friends who didn't have specific caretaking responsibilities, but liked to have a life outside of work. They couldn't live in line with their values and work 50 to 60 hours a week. And I knew it impacted organizations because organizations were losing talented people because they were burned out and couldn't manage kind of a chaotic working environment. And so it's really bad for your organization, right? It's bad for your revenue. It's bad for your team's morale. It's bad for the impact that you're trying to have on the world. And so I thought, well, what if I can help organizations become more sustainable and more healthy so that they can accomplish their mission without burning their team out? And that is where MatchPace was born, because I know organizations want to do good work. And I know people want to do good work. And so could there be thoughtfully designed workplaces to accomplish their mission and enable their team to have sustainable personal lives? So for the past 5 years, that's what I've been doing. At MatchPace, we help organizations become more healthy and more sustainable. Some people call it culture. Some people call it organizational design. It's all about organizations accomplishing their mission and not burning people out. One way organizations are trying to do that is through initiatives like the 4-day work week. And so that brings us into this conversation. And I really do want it to be a conversation. I'm Elizabeth Knox. I run MatchPace. I'm joined by my colleague, Carly. She's going to help me with monitoring for any technical difficulties or the chat, and also listening to the questions that you all are bringing up to make sure that we're answering them thoroughly. And I intentionally designed this time to be a smaller group. I didn't want a large webinar on the 4-day work week. I wanted you all to have space to process and to think and to meet other leaders who are considering this for their teams. So for the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to walk through an overview of the 4-day work week, the questions that you all submitted when you registered, and then we're going to leave with some next steps for you to consider with your team. Thank you for having your video on. We've done a little bit of introductions, which is nice. And then feel free to share, when you offer your answer to a first question or something, your name and your organization. Questions and thinking is the name of the game for today. I emailed you a worksheet 10 minutes ago. Carly's going to pop that into the chat. Even if you can't print it right now, just open it up and have an eye on it and, use that as a reference. So the 4-day work week has actually been around for a while. Even before the pandemic, people were talking about this, and there are other variations on the theme. There's the 5-hour workday, there's the 4-day work week, but attention has really been ramping up on this, especially as recently as last week. This organization here that I've screenshot called the 4-day work week Global, and they are a nonprofit organization that ran a pilot on the 4-day work week, and they just published their results last week. They supported 33 countries to try out the 4-day work week, and the results were really impressive and really cool. 85% of the companies recorded revenue growth for the same quarter last year. The average manager rated productivity and overall experience a 9.2 out of 10. Sleep went up, stress went down, and the environmental impact went down. 100% of the companies who responded to the post-pilot survey, so 27 of the original 33, are planning to continue with a 4-day work week. So pretty positive experience, pretty resounding success. And this pilot, what it tested for was 180-100. So 100% of outcome, employees were still expected to deliver 100% of the work that they've been delivering over 5 days, 80% of the hours, and 100% of the pay. So I think that is kind of like what we all want, right? When we think of the 4-day work week, that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for something where we can continue to produce the same outcomes that we've been producing. We can still get 100% of our compensation, but our hours are decreased. And so we're going to talk about how is that even possible. But so with all of that, like good news, it's like, this is it. This is the hot new workplace thing. It caught your attention. It's what brought you here. And I'm so glad that you're here. And so maybe the 4-day work week will be for you. Maybe it's what you and your team need to be able to do your work really well and have your priorities outside of work. And also, maybe not. It might not be for you. And that's an okay answer. And there are still really good things that you can do for your team. It's just that the 4-day work week is so catchy that people are like, that's what's getting attention right now. But I want you to kind of walk into this, and we're going to actually ask the first question here in a second, recognizing that there may be some things in this that work for you, or there might be something that could work better. So I want to ask you to keep an open mind. And so my first question is, what does the 4-day work week mean to you and your team? And not just the acronym, not just 4 days, but what does it represent? What are you hoping that it will accomplish? Or what do you think are the underlying desires that are driving your interests in this and your team's interest in this? Take a minute and go ahead and write this down on a piece of paper. And then I'm going to ask you to share it out loud as you are comfortable. See that you joined us. Hi. Well, glad you could join us. And we totally understand if the 3-month-old ends up attending as well, or if you have to go tend to them. You looked up first. So what do you think your team's underlying needs are, or your underlying needs? What do you think people want? So you went right for the deeper things. So you're looking for Black liberation. You're looking for agency. You're looking to live in line with your values. These are the needs that you're trying to address with this. So you got right to it, the heart of it, partnership and fulfillment. That's awesome. Do you feel like there are needs that your team is looking for underneath? What you all are bringing to light is that this is a shorthand, right? The 4-day work week is maybe what people are looking for, but they're actually looking for some of these things underneath. They're looking for liberation. They're looking for agency. They're looking for partnership. They're looking for balance. The 4-day work week is a quick way to collect that and communicate that at once. They want to do a good job at work, and they want to have time for their other priorities. They want calmer days. They probably want less time at work. Some leaders hear that and they get a little bit uncomfortable. And they're like, well, good enough for you, but what about all the work we have to do? And so I'm going to ask you to go to the second question. What are the ways that responding to those needs can benefit your organization? If you're the type of person who gets a little, anxious about that, sounds like the two of you who've spoken so far, you get it pretty clearly how it will benefit your org, but just take a minute and write those things down for yourself. So you all had highlighted a lot of those benefits, right? That it's good for retention. It's good for living in line with our values. I want to kind of bring up at the beginning that this really has the potential to be a win-win for individuals and the organization. And it's important to remember that you can give them those things through any number of solutions. It might be the 4-day work week. It might not be. It's also important to remember that if you try to give your team a 4-day work week without addressing some of these other issues, it's likely going to create more chaos, because you're just kind of trying to slap a Band-Aid on a problem. And so what we want to do is be deeper in our intention with this. So I want to go over 2 foundations as we talk about the 4-day work week. These are foundations that we use in our work at MatchPace. And the first is this framework that we use to guide our client engagements. The second foundation is neuroscience. So the first foundation is what we call the hallmarks of an effective organization. First is vision and values, a shared understanding of the direction for the organization, supported by the words and actions of the leadership, so that employees are clear how they measure decisions and how they focus their time and their attention. The second is defined accountability. These are articulated lines of responsibility. People know who's responsible for what and who's not responsible for what. That creates a lot of opportunity for confusion in an organization if people don't know, where their job starts and stops. The third is honesty and trust. And this is creating a shared experience where all the teammates feel like they can be upfront and vulnerable and are committed to conversations, like direct conversations and truthfulness. The next is a healthy work experience. This is the day-to-day experience, balancing enough freedom to encourage creativity and growth, and enough boundaries so that people have direction and know when they need to do something. And that can be mutually decided on, but that's creating an environment so people have that kind of psychological safety to know what's going on. And then the last is the structure for sustained growth. And this is just the creation and maintenance of tools that support the mission. These are the areas that you will need to have locked down as you think about a 4-day work week to really gain the benefits from it. Because if your team isn't clear on the vision or the strategy and they can't get the right work done in 5 days, how do we think they can get it done in 4 days? Or if there isn't deep trust now, how will your team react? Will they really feel that and believe in this new approach? How will you feel as a leader with your team being less available if there isn't deep trust and honesty between you? Our framework isn't in order, and the 4-day work week falls under healthy work experience. You want to have these other things in place, before you make too many adjustments around the work experience, because if you don't have those things, you might not be making the right adjustments, or people won't know how to operate within the new arrangement. So I want you to go back to your worksheet, and I want you to ask yourself which of those hallmarks feels the strongest for your organization, and which of those has the most room for growth. Vision and strategy, defined accountability, honesty and trust, healthy work experience, and structure for sustained growth. And then the next question is, what's one thing that you can do? And I really genuinely mean it. I don't mean it, it's like, oh, what's one thing you can do to make your weakness stronger? How can you lean into one of those hallmarks, like the one that's the strongest for you? How can you lean into it and say, hey, this is, as we're considering the 4-day work week, our vision and our strategy is really clear. And so I know that that's secure, and you can lean into that. Or maybe it is, I think we do have some trust issues on our team, which is a big, hairy problem. Of your strengths or your weaknesses, what's one thing that you can do as you consider, one of those things that you can lean on as you consider the 4-day work week? And would love to have you share if you're up for it. Go for it. That is very much so one of the structures, right? And so there's a thing of what kinds of growth do people want, and how do we foster that growth, and how do we get clarity on that? And so that might be something you shared that your organization said, well, you can go down to 80% time, you're going to go down to 80% pay. What does that mean for your growth in the organization and leadership opportunities? And some people want leadership opportunities, some people don't, some people, but is it going to influence them? I think that's a really good thing to be thinking about. We do this assessment at the beginning of engagements with clients. What we measure is the employee's experience and understanding of these hallmarks. And then what we measure is actually leadership's understanding of the employee's experience. Because often what happens is leadership is like, of course, our vision's abundantly clear and everybody knows, and it's like, no, let's just make sure that we understand that gap and work to close it. Because of course it's clear to you, but has everybody been able to understand it? Then I want to go to the second foundation of our work at MatchPace, and it's neuroscience, and it's how the brain works and how we can optimize it. This is kind of the key to cracking that nut if you want to follow the 180-100 principle. There are ways to do the 4-day work week with organizations that are more manual labor focused. There are often salary implications because those people are paid hourly, but for people who are paid on salary, what we're trying to shift is to make the work week shorter, but still get the same amount of work done. The neuroscience is a big part of that. And we need to remember that our brains operate differently than our bodies doing manual labor. Our brains need the ability to focus. And for most of us, our days are pretty long and pretty choppy. They start with, a lot of people like keep their phone by their bed and look at their work email first thing in the morning. And then sometimes they close their day by looking at their email one last time at night. And so in between those bookends, unfortunately, a lot of people have various meetings spaced inconveniently so as to never give you time to get deep work done. You shared that this was your 5th Zoom meeting for the day. So that may feel a certain way in your brain and in your body. We have to think about if that's the most productive and effective way for our organizations to work. We often have Slack exchanges that have no defined end. And then there are just a lot of studies that show concentration wanes the longer that we're at work. So we become less efficient. We take longer to make decisions. We lose sharpness. And so we get this law of diminishing returns. We get less for our effort the longer the workday stretches. That's just the number of hours, right? And then we talked about what the workday looked like. This professor out at UC Irvine, her name is Dr. Gloria Markham. She surveyed and tested and found out that the average knowledge worker is interrupted 17 times an hour. Some of those interruptions are valid. We have people who have legitimate needs in our lives. We have colleagues, bosses, family. And so they may be poorly timed, but those people have legitimate needs from you. And then some of those needs aren't so legitimate. We kind of let technology run our day. And so we're really attuned to a ping. It takes us 15 minutes to regain our focus. So if you think about it, that the average knowledge worker is interrupted 17 times an hour and takes 15 minutes to regain a focus, our work days are actually not that conducive to getting work done. And so just because we punch a clock for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, or 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, doesn't mean that those hours are good for creativity and productivity. As you think about a 4-day work week or an alternate schedule or trying to maximize things, it's really important to keep this brain science in mind, because it's quite possible that the way you're working right now is costing your organization its mission because it's so chaotic, and it's costing your team and yourself your own peace. I did a little cute thing with the slide here where I overlaid the hallmarks with the brain science. If we are thinking about getting these things organized so that we can create a place where the brain can function with clear priorities, people know what their jobs are, and deepening trust. That's how we accelerate work to get the right work done in less time. And that's when you can start to play with your schedule and build something that's fun and effective, that works for your team and works for your clients. And so now we're probably going to start to get into the questions that you all had when you came in, but I wanted to lay that foundation. Then you can start to see, oh, where could these answers come from to the 4-day work week? What kind of schedule can we do? Is it a 4x10? Is it a 4x8? Do we reduce pay? Do we keep pay? What do we do about how our clients need our attention? What about funders? These are all really good questions and all things that will feel more manageable when the foundation of how you work is secure. The next step, as you consider a 4-day work week, is to explore the ecosystem that you work in. So the second page of that worksheet, I'm going to ask you to write down what kind of work you do. You shared, like, you work with a lot of creatives. That's going to influence what kind of environment you want them to work in. Maybe that you work in a job that in an organization that people can largely do their own thing on their own time, or maybe you run an aftercare program for children and you need to be present at specific times of the day. For all of you, it's probably somewhere in between, and you recognize that there are things that people can do individually, and then there are times when you need to be able to know that people are available for collaboration and synergy. I'm going to ask you to answer the types of work that you do. Also, start to think about the people that you serve, your clients, your stakeholders, your funders. What are their expectations? It might have been you've got government contracts that are potentially, I think, billed hourly. Start to write down, like, what are their expectations and needs? What's the ecosystem that you're in? I'm going to have you answer those first two questions, the types of work that we do and stakeholders' needs and expectations. So we've got you now. What did either of you find in terms of the type of work that you do, stakeholders' needs and expectations? What kind of stakeholders do you have? Do you have funders who have certain expectations for you? If you're working around education, are you kind of tied to a typical school-ish calendar, whether it's time of day or season of the year? And you bring up a lot of good points. The last one that you talked about, this is where we function in these ecosystems. We only kind of have as much room to move as the ecosystem in which we're living. That's why there's organizations like Push Black to push for Black liberation so that, we're not constrained by this ecosystem. Or that's why at MatchPace, we work primarily with organizations rather than working with an individual, because an individual who's burned out, they're still in this ecosystem of like a ball of chaos in their organization. And so there's only so much that one person can do. And that's why I wanted, this conversation to be among leaders, because you have the potential to create a different ecosystem in your organization. For you, you're working with students, trying to help them not go into an ecosystem like that is another challenge. This is where you've got this idea of what our team's underlying needs are and how you've got a kind of a grounding in how addressing those needs will benefit your organization. And your strengths and your weaknesses in terms of what makes an effective organization. And this is where you add in that ecosystem. You add in what types of work you do and what your stakeholders are expecting. And you have the possibility to be creative. If you have an agency where you have primary responsibility and control over it, you can be even more creative. You take client needs into account, but you can arrange a 4-day work week where you ensure responsiveness 5 days a week. That's something that you can create. Or you could possibly talk to your clients and explain what you're doing, or just offer, hey, this is what we're doing to make sure that this is going to help us give you better service and deliverables. I'm going to ask you to take a minute and dream, given the needs of the team that you're trying to meet, how those things benefit your organization, your strengths and your weaknesses, your real financial concerns. I want to ask you, what's coming up for you? What kind of alternate schedule could you see? So as we move to the end of our time together, I want to kind of bring you back to, it's this type of work that will make the 4-day work week real. I wish that it was a switch that you could flip. I wish that you could just move over, but it's these foundations that you want to have in place. It's the thoughtfulness that you likely already had coming into this. That's why you wanted to come to this type of event, and more of the thoughtfulness that you put in today. It will take conversations with your team. It will take piloting an approach. I really want to encourage that you want to test out your approach. That's going to be crucial for your psychological safety as a leader, to feel like I've committed to 3 months of checking this out. There are parts of it that are likely going to work and parts that aren't going to work. And your clients and your team are going to need the same thing, because maybe it doesn't work well for your team. We had a client that went to a 4-day work week and found it was causing more stress for their team. And so their team, knowing that it was a pilot, knew that they could go back. And they didn't go back completely to the way that they were working, but they went back. They went to a different approach. You're going to iterate it, make it better, get rid of the parts that don't work. You don't have to do it alone. At MatchPace, our mission is to partner with organizations like yours to create healthy and sustainable workplaces where you are fulfilling your mission with the support of an engaged and aligned team. Whether we're helping address overall effectiveness within an organization or working on a specific initiative like the 4-day work week, all of our offerings aim to increase your impact, reduce overwhelm, and give you and your team the opportunity to prioritize both work and life. So if you're interested in continuing the conversation, you can reach out to me directly to set up a consultation. We can talk specifically about your organization and what your needs are. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I offer a lot of education and encouragement for leaders who are creating more sustainable paces for their team. I've got one more question for you, and that is, what is the next right step for you? It's the last question on the sheet that I sent you, and your answer may be to set up a one-on-one with me, or maybe to have a conversation with someone on your team, or to start the conversation with your stakeholders. As you bring them these thoughts, what does your organization want to consider? I would just ask that we close with that. I would love to hear from you the next step that you're going to take. Awesome. And I think you were one of the people who I said, hey, if you would like a copy of Work Reimagined mailed to you, put your mailing address, but you put your email address. So I was going to follow up and say, let me get your mailing address, a physical copy of the book. And I love how your baby, like on cue, when you said have to be responsive to a baby, that was perfect. I don't know if you planted them to do that. Take it. We want the world to be different when he's working. We want it now. And so we're trying to change it now. Thank you for joining. It was really lovely to meet with you and to talk with you. And I'm excited for the ways that you're being so intentional and thoughtful with your organization. Have a great rest of your day.